Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Queenager. This is about midlife marital drift and other signs of the midlife collision. Sometimes we use a slightly more cluster word, which is a bit ruder than that. But I've had quite a busy week. You can see I'm back in London. And after all my junketing around Greece and the Camino and all the rest of it, it was really lovely to be home. Often what happens after you've had lots of lovely times running around, you come back to a super busy week. And I kicked off on Monday with a packed London noon circle, which was all about metamorphosis and how we change into a new version of ourselves. Wow, there were some impressive ladies there. On Tuesday, we'd ran an in-person noon support group in the flat in Soho. Happy return to old times. And big thanks to Sally Jackson and Julia Moreno for running it. It was free. If you're a noon member and would like some support, then that's there. And I also went to a reading by my stepsister, Jess. I went to a reading by my lovely sister, Jess Mills, about my stepmother, Tess, because it was the anniversary of her death day. It was 8 years since Tessa died, and Jessie was talking about her amazing new book, which I highly recommend, which is called We Are Each Other, which is all about Tessa's death, and Jess became a mum just as Tessa was dying. And it's a really beautiful book about grief and birth and love and how grief blows up our lives and changes everything, but how love continues. It was a really special evening. And then that theme continued on Wednesday because we had a Noon Pro member trip to see the Tracy Emin exhibition at the Tate. Do go. The Emin exhibition was so moving about the abortion which defined her work as an artist, and again about motherhood or lack of motherhood, but also really good on the double standards around women and sex. That weird blend of power and denigration that we all swam in as teenagers, being wanted and desired and then turned a slag if we did it. Her art resonated with all of us, and it really made me want to grill all the men who were there, particularly the older ones, about how it made them feel. Because I think what Emin does so brilliantly, along with people like Marina Abramovich, it kind of made me happy that the full female experience, particularly around objectification and sex, is finally being explored. And these artists really make us see the misogyny embedded in the world around us as we grew up. Through kind of new eyes, I think it really makes us stop and take stock of what was normalised for us, which really shouldn't have been, which was this idea that we were kind of valued through the kind of male gaze, and yet it was impossible to get it right. If you kind of were too sexy, then you were a slag. If you didn't, then you were frigid. And Tracy Emin's framing of this, of how it kind of limited her and how also she escaped that lens, is really compelling. I really think it's definitely worth going to see it, and I'd really love to know what you think of it. If you go, let me know at noon, eleanor@noon.org.uk. We've also been exploring lots of new Noon partnerships this week. The first of which is going to be a brand new Noon Entrepreneur Club, sponsored by our friends at BKL, who are the accountants for entrepreneurs, and that will launch next month. We've been filming some content for it this week. But if you're a Queenager entrepreneur who wants to become, or you want to become one, do sign up to our new club. It's free, and it will provide a rich tapestry of support, expert advice, and an entrepreneur noon circle, which I'm really excited about, and lots of other inspiration. We're going to be doing a kick-off event on June the 30th in London at Bang Studio, where we have the circle, which will be free. So do sign up. So that's enough. That's enough preamble. In the midst of this, the big thing I did last week is I wrote an article for The Independent about midlife marital drift, linked to the news that amazing Queenager Tess Daly from Strictly and her husband Vernon K, 51, were divorcing. They said that the split was amicable, and they did a whole kind of decoupling thing about how, they were looking forward to being ongoing shared parents of their two daughters. And we did the piece ran in The Independent, thanks Vic Harper for the commission, and we did an Instagram post about it, which has had 200,000 views. So it's really interesting how many of the women who commented resonated with our take that Daly's in the midst of a classic midlife cluster or midlife collision. And we pointed out that she'd just left the job that had defined her for years. She had an empty nest. She'd just split with her husband, and she admitted in a recent interview that in the whole of her marriage, she'd never been on a girls' trip or gone and done something for herself because she so wanted to be there for her daughters, and I'm sure she was working really hard. But Daly, it struck me, is at a classic moment of Queenager pivot, finally putting herself top of her to-do list for the first time in decades. She talked about how she'd kind of grown apart from her husband because they had really different interests, and I wrote about how appearances can be deceiving, particularly when it comes to midlife marriage drift. It's where couples don't particularly row or not get on. Neither has an affair. There isn't a particular instant, but the couple just slowly kind of fall out of love. Often this is linked to a larger midlife shift, particularly for women, where having put their own lives on hold to prioritise everyone else's needs, kids, family, husband, career, when the nest is empty, they finally get an overwhelming desire to do their own thing. When we did our big piece of research with Accenture, we had nearly half of women say, finally, it gets to be about me in my 50s. And that really reminded me and Jen of what we'd found in our Beyond the Break research earlier this year, which we did with Mish Kondareya and Julius Baer, where we uncovered this phenomenon of what we called walkaway wives. And we found that 64% of divorces are now instigated by women, with a quarter of women reporting that they'd fallen out of love as the reason for why they left their marriage. And in the survey we conducted with Survation for the report, which looked at 2,000 women aged 45 to 65 benchmarked against the UK population, we found that women in 2026 are realising that they don't have to stay in marriages which no longer work for them. And indeed, 56% in the survey said they would end a marriage because they were unhappy. Another quarter reported that falling out of love was behind their desire to split. Always used to be kind of men instigating these divorces at midlife, but it really isn't now. And another 11% just didn't want to spend the rest of their life with someone whom they'd grown apart. So we felt that real sense of looking across the table and thinking, well, if there's another 50 years of this, it's not you. And that thing of prioritising our own needs again is such a drumbeat at the noon circles. This week, both on the in-person circle in London and online, we talked at length about the midlife shift and how we need courage to sit in it, to be in the chrysalis while we metamorphose into the next version of ourselves. Often we know what we don't want, but we don't know what we do want. And really also about this midlife collision, about how Tess Daly is certainly not the only one being hit with change on multiple fronts. And our research shows that 1 in 5 women by 50 has been through at least 5 of what we do when we play Queenager bingo, which is like divorce, bereavement, redundancy, the empty nest, caring for elderly parents or a Gen Z child who's got some kind of anxiety or problem, not to mention menopause, health issues, and some kind of other mental, physical or financial abuse. And often all of these hit together, derailing our lives. But the good news is, and it's really important to say this when we go through that doom, is that the women who go through the most, who have the full Queenager bingo quotient, often end up the happiest because they've shed what no longer serves them. And they end up with what I call a life which is resonant, which finally matches on the outside how we feel on the inside. But to get there, we really do have to do the work. We have to ask ourselves what we want and dare to listen to the answer. We have to sit in the fog and the confusion, maybe for a couple of years while the mud settles and we finally see clearly again. This sense of drift in midlife marriages and that sense of anxiety, excitement, and not being done yet, it's behind many midlife divorces for sure. But it's also the motivation behind many other really positive midlife shifts, whether that's around career or family or friendships or downsizing, which we're going to be talking about next week, or retraining. Some of us feel stuck and choose change, and others have change thrust upon us. Many women at this age talk about wanting to take the road less travelled, explore aspects of themselves which have been damped down before now. And I think that's really right. And I also think that as estrogen levels decline, we become less interested in being pleasing and more open to the call of our untethered self. That sense of, if not now, when? And this fuels many a walkaway wife to leave, but it also prompts Queenagers, maybe to take that redundancy package or do something they've always wanted to do before it's too late. And I think that that can be a really positive thing, the sense of one circle ending and a new one beginning. And in the last, in the circles last week, we heard about so many incredible Queenager reinventions, becoming a pilot, an acupuncturist, a garden designer, maybe taking a holiday alone for the first time, getting on a plane without anyone else for the first time in our lives. And also, I think what's really important is I know how many of you are being full-time carers. I love the story of one woman who's looking after her husband who's got dementia, who just decided she was going to put him into respite care and go and have a bit of an adventure herself before it was too late. And that sense in all of this is how important it is to be intentional about what we do at this point. And I think we get to a point, I certainly feel this, that I just can't do things now if my heart isn't in it. I feel like I spent so many years working to other people's agendas, deadlines and priorities that this is the time where I really get to choose. And that feels really special. I feel so purposeful about the work that we do here together at noon. And I'm so inspired by all of you and how we are together really changing the dial on what it means to be a midlife woman. And also, I think it's often what we don't want to go back to. I've had so many conversations with people about how the idea of returning to what we once were now feels kind of almost impossible. I mean, I feel like I ran on cortisol and adrenaline in such an intense way for so many years. And I now feel that I really, I don't want to do that anymore. And sometimes when I go back into that life, I write an article or I go on the radio, I really feel the kind of toll it took on me, and what once seemed normal now seems, really different, impossible, or not something that I really want to do. And I suppose that is evidence of change in motion, because really this shift, this pivot is an internal one, and it's around how we categorize success, and what we want to spend the rest of the time that we have left doing, and how intentional we need to be about that. And importantly, that's also to do with who we want to spend that time with. And sometimes in some marriages, it really is a case of, no, darling, it's not you for the next 50 years. But that can be true of careers and friendships that drain us. And so this really is the moment to be intentional and clear about what we really want. And of course, we don't always know what that is. We had a really good conversation about that in the online circle last week, when one of the women was facing a big career kind of financial decision about whether she took a redundancy package or not. And she said she just really didn't know what she wanted, that she kept kind of wavering one way or the other between the suggestions. And so I was saying, well, why not lie in a bath or in bed, be really quiet, light a candle, give yourself some peace and some time, and ask yourself this question: what does my heart really want? And that sounds like an easy one, but actually, the first time I did that, my heart began to tell me what it wanted, and my brain was so quick to kind of cut in and say that's impossible before my poor little heart had even had a chance to say that it wanted, that it actually made me laugh out loud, because I kind of caught myself kind of in process. And I think we often do that we can completely shut down the thing that maybe we really yearn to do, because the other bit of us is saying, no, that's impossible, we can't do that. And so I think it's really important to allow ourselves to dream, to get in touch with that sense of what the shape that we move into could be, if we shape shifted and flowed into the state that we would take internally, rather than the shape that we've been kind of forced to take because of the lives and the culture and family and everyone around us. But if we're going to flow into that shape and find our new kind of role, or on the new iteration of ourselves, then the only compass that can direct us towards that is an internal one. And we really need to learn to start navigating by it and listening to it, which a lot of us find really, really hard. And I think the other really important thing to say about midlife divorce is it used to be seen as such a personal failure, and it carried a stigma. And actually, one of the really interesting things about the research we did early in the year was that 2/3 of women thought that there was no shame attached to ending a marriage, and 1/3 of walkaway wives said in the aftermath of their divorce they felt happier than they'd ever been. And what was also interesting is that 76% of women who'd already been divorced said they would do it again in a heartbeat if a subsequent marriage wasn't to their liking. So I think what we are picking up here is a kind of agency about what we want the next bit of our world or our lives to be like. And when we asked the women how they felt about their divorce, of course, the top answers was sad, because it's a wrench, it's awful to end long-term relationships. But the next three adjectives were relief, happiness, and liberation, which I think really reflected the strong sense of midlife women not being done yet, and knowing that there is another act, it's a real kind of another act to come in their lives. So I think that's that's important to acknowledge for all of us. Oh, excuse me there. So I really believe that this Queenager period, what Aviva Wittenberg Cox calls Q3, this bit from 50-75, really is a new era of becoming. And sometimes that is about walking away from a marriage which no longer serves us, but it's not restricted to that. Just remember, 70% of midlife women, according to Lucy Ryan's research, said they wanted to power up their careers. And Queenager entrepreneurs are the fastest growing segment in that particular club. And there's a lot of research which shows that older Queenagers, older people are twice as successful when it comes to business. So if that's you, if you've been thinking of doing a business for a while, or you'd just like to know a bit more about it, do come along to our new Queenager Noon Entrepreneur Club. It's going to be brilliant. And so 30th of June, put that in your diary. Look forward to seeing you then. And I hope you've had a really good week. And whatever your own midlife pivot is, remember just to give yourself some time and to really listen to that inner voice, because that inner compass is the only thing that's really going to get you to where you want to be. Thank you so much. If you'd like to know anything else about what we're doing, do check out noon.org.uk. Do come to a circle, free for our members. Membership's only £8 a month. There's so many amazing things going on at Noon, our book club, our entrepreneur club, all our circles. We've got a whole raft of fantastic new events and retreats and things launching imminently. So look forward to seeing you at something soon. Take care. Have a great day. Bye.